So, I'm back. Well, I never left, it's just that, sometimes I cough too much to be able to even talk all day, and that was pretty much yesterday. Today, my throat's messed up, but I at least can say stuff, right? So, the president had a pretty good week in terms of media coverage and just one win after another. Antifa's releasing bulletins saying hide because the feds are coming. Good, basically. My guess on what the strategy was with DHS, I'm fairly certain that's what's being implemented, and we're seeing the fruits of it already. A dude got killed in Portland. It was, I should say they caught the guy who killed the guy in Portland. He was killed in a fight with U.S. Marshals. Don't pull a rifle on them or they're going to level you. More footage of that. More footage of the guy stalking them. The Kenosha visit the president took was a big win. Pelosi got herself in trouble with a huge own goal, followed by a bigger own goal, when she basically made it worse by saying she was set up and that she was going to, she demanded an apology from the salon, and then her daughter wrote a legal letter to the salon threatening them, which of course the salon just immediately published. Major own goals. It was kind of a fun news week, right? It was just like, all right, things are improving gradually, and just watching the Democrats flail and do stupid stuff is amusing. But, like usual, things are going too well, so now it's time for controversy. People used to joke that, things are going well, time for a mass shooting. And people, there are people who believe that, that stuff was like, psyops or whatever. I think it's more just coincidental that the negligence that usually lead to these mass shootings, like the law enforcement negligence, particularly the school shootings, it just does catch up over a certain amount of time. And if you line up essentially how the news cycles are working, how popularity is working, and how the economy goes, you're always going to find places where these things link up, and it could be completely random, but it feels like that. It feels like, things are going too well, something bad's got to happen, right? Well, the schools aren't open to shoot up, so what happened, right? The Atlantic drops a story saying in 2018 the president called World War I veterans, basically dead, the fallen of World War I, suckers and losers, and that he disparaged John McCain, which him and John McCain hate each other. Like that's not really news, but they threw it in there, and that he canceled a visit to I think it was a cemetery for those lost at Belleau Wood in World War I. He canceled that on his own. Now that controversy about the cancellation of the visit, that had actually been brought up back in 2018, and then the Navy put it to rest. And then there's like a Freedom of Information Act that brought it to light, where basically the Navy said, no, we're the ones who essentially called it off, because we said it was not worth the flight risk because our flight ceiling was too low and the weather was too bad. Basically, if we can't guarantee your safety, like if it's not a search and rescue mission, we would prefer not to fly. So the president listened to them. Secret Service wasn't gonna, wasn't gonna challenge the Navy. So yeah, you get out here and you fly these helicopters. It's just not how it works. And it wouldn't have been a big deal if they had lied about it and pretended that the president had canceled it. Well, the story has now resurfaced in 2020 because now the Atlantic says they have 4 anonymous sources that all say this. Now, we know from every news cycle and every story that ever breaks, anytime it says anonymous sources, pretty much it usually ends up just being complete crap. And the anonymous sources were basically echoed by the Atlantic said this, and then other places report that they said this. And then Fox News' Jennifer Griffin, she screwed up big time. She basically said that, we've confirmed that anonymous sources have. I think it may have been a miscommunication. I don't think she may have been deliberately misleading people, but nonetheless, she really screwed up, and they had to retract the story within just hours, because it was just essentially the same 4 anonymous people that the Atlantic was talking about, and we don't even know who they are, and nobody's been able to contact these people, because likely most of them don't exist, or they're people and that's not actually what they said, and they're citing them if it's not actually what they said. They said something more nuanced. I mean, do I have a doubt that President Trump shits on John McCain every once in a while? Every time his name's brought up? No, of course not. Trump really hated McCain. If you want to understand that, go watch Razor Fist video on McCain. That actually explains That explains a lot of why basically McCain is so despised in the GOP. So if you're a moderate and you don't know why like McCain is not liked by the right, at least not anymore, that video will give you basically a big overview of kind of how people feel about him, particularly the newer generations, particularly the Trump types. So, but that's beside the point. So they, they bring this up, they put it in the president's face, and then they say, "Did you call John McCain a loser for being a veteran?" And he says, "No, I never called him a loser, and I never called the people who sacrificed, and died for the country suckers or losers." He never said any of that stuff. John Bolton says he never said any of that stuff, and John Bolton isn't exactly the president's biggest fan. Other witnesses who were there said the same thing. They were like, "No, the president never did that." But of course, then, they dig up a tweet where President Trump had called John McCain a loser. Now, it was in reference to the fact he lost in 2008. And also just because, he called John McCain a loser because he doesn't like John McCain. It didn't have to do with his military service. But, in the past, he did dig. He said, he likes his veterans uncaptured. And he probably shouldn't have said that. There's a reason why he said that, because it has to do with essentially what John did while in captivity, where he recorded North Vietnamese propaganda. And he never was court-martialed for it. Which, that's a mixed bag. But they hide those things because, it's not exactly a flattering part of John McCain's, war hero story. So, whatever. Trump's aware of this. He's in the camp that really fucking hates John McCain like Razor Fist. So, it wasn't too hard for them to dig up stuff of him saying disparaging things against John McCain. So then they say, well, yeah, he's lying about calling John McCain a loser. It means he's lying about this other stuff, too. The Fox News article by Jennifer Griffin, which it wasn't even just Fox News. It was people covering the fact Fox News covered this and said this. We're saying, oh my God, even Fox News are saying this story is true. And it wasn't. It wasn't true. We know it wasn't true. But this now has dominated the news cycle. And I've seen countless people on Facebook and stuff share this story saying, they're so civilized and this, how can people support this president? And they say even Fox News is calling them out. When really they're already, a day behind the news cycle, because Fox, when they said that, they had to pull it back. Trump even said, fire Jennifer Griffin. Now, I think if it was an honest mistake and Jennifer Griffin did this, I think maybe she should be suspended for a little while. I don't think her whole career should end, because there are things she can do to make amends for it. Like, for instance, the Fox has to now cover twofold, saying basically that this was an inaccurate story, and we have to prove the opposite, and to let the president respond and all that kind of stuff. Because you are allowed to make mistakes as a journalist. I don't think that should end your entire career. But the president's calling for her to be fired, and a lot of it is just because that gave the left a huge weapon that was completely unearned, and it was really, really irresponsible. And he's pissed off because now the news cycle that was going so well for him just got torpedoed by this fake story from 2018 that the Atlantic was sitting on. Now, this is the kind of thing I expect to drop in October, but I think the Dems are getting a little bit smarter than that. They're releasing these things as they need them in the cycles. Because if they drop it in October, people then say, well, this is so close to the election that obviously it's fake. They tried to do that to him with the, it was the tape. The tape with Billy Bush, where he was, talking like, sometimes guys talk. And, I don't particularly talk like that, but I definitely have been around guys who talk like that. I don't know. It's like a cultural thing. Trump's a billionaire. He gets a lot of snatch. Like, that's, he grew up like that. I knew he wasn't a saint, and nothing he said in that recording really surprised me. But, they ran with that. But the fact that came out in October, people kind of rose up to Trump's defense, because they said, basically, you've been sitting on this tape since it was NBC who had it, since he first launched his campaign, and you waited till October to drop it to do the most amount of damage. So people got pissed off, and people didn't buy it. Right? I mean, some people, I don't think that tape swung anybody voting either direction. It might have made more people come out and vote for Hillary, because, Trump is just that bad. But it didn't convince anybody who was a moderate, who was, leaning towards Trump or trying to make a decision which way they were going to go, because it was transparently political. I suspect we'll still see this stuff happen in October, but if they're smart, they should be putting their best stuff forward so that they can kind of regurgitate it and control the news cycle leading up to October. Because September, in my opinion, is more important to October. Because in October, it's like that's where the race begins. as September. Everything before that is like jockeying for the pole position. So it makes sense that they're doing this kind of stuff now. Also, the fact that Trump essentially dominated this first week of September and the end of August, the last half of August, Trump just dominated the news cycles and did amazing. And he's got peace deals and all kinds of stuff happening all over the world. Everything's turning up, you know. Trump, you know, he's absolutely kicking ass. GOP's getting tractions with minorities and all this other stuff. So they got to do something. So they drop this thing. It doesn't affect somebody like me in terms of like, oh, they said this thing with anonymous sources. I just usually just throw it in the trash because it's like, well, it's anonymous sources. It's not worth anything. Or it's more of a let's sideline that and wait till there's actual confirmation. And all there is counter evidence. But they still have gotten the meme out that Trump said these things. Biden in his speech said, if these things are true, and then went on to criticize him as if he had said these things. People are going to believe it. People who already hate Trump are going to believe it, and then therefore they're going to repeat it. And therefore people who don't know what the actual deal is might believe it. That's the point. That's why they do that. So it's dirty. I mean, a lot of us can see right through it, but, you know, your average Joe not paying attention, they might think, you know, they already have a low opinion of Donald Trump, but maybe they're not ready to vote for Joe Biden, but then they find that, you know, he said that, and they pearl clutch. It's really dirty. I don't know what the president's going to do to pivot on it. I think he should probably, should just have a conference where he just unloads and just basically, like, completely, you know, eviscerates the press for running with this. Because that might be, you know, but then again, that might backfire too, because they might say, oh my God, you know, look at him, he's how upset he is about this. That must mean they hit home, right? I don't know. I don't know really what the proper response to this situation is politically. So it'll be interesting to see how the Trump campaign adapts. It's just really disheartening to see this kind of story go around and get as much traction as it gets when it's completely bogus. There's no evidence of it. It's just something the Atlantic is saying, which isn't exactly a reliable newspaper source. But I don't know. It's early. I suspect. I don't know how long they're going to be able to milk this for. I suspect they'll be saying it. This will be part of the repertoire of you know, the fine people hoax and the Mexicans are rapists, and like it's just going to be another thing they stack against him. You know, kids in cages, even though he didn't do that. So it does seek to divide us. I don't know how many veterans are going to buy it, but I'm sure some will. You know, definitely the neocon warmonger types. They're jumping all over that. They think it's, you know, oh, that's good fuel. But I don't know. It's tiresome to watch in a lot of ways, because it's like I do enjoy the jousting, but when something like this comes out and it's just meant to make people angry, and it's essentially just an outright fabrication, and they run with it like it's a real story, and then all the other news outlets cover it because it's so outrageous, and they say, well, the Atlantic says this. It's like, yeah, but you're giving it airtime, and now that is, you know, this idea has now been propagated into the culture, and people are running with it as if it's true, and it's not true. So, you know, it's like, oh, he said to inject bleach. Like, no, he never said anything like that. But people ran with it, and then people repeated it, and then people were, you know, like, whenever there's a report that someone's reporting something from anonymous sources, I roll my eyes and I go, like, you guys are wasting your time. And like, Fox never should have ran a large segment on it and given it credence, because it wasn't a story. It wasn't based on anything. The story should have been the Atlantic brings something up with anonymous sources and no actual evidence, and the only people they can find deny it happened. So I don't know. Expect more of this more often as we get closer to the election. But this is where it kind of stops being fun and starts just being really tedious. Not that politics are all that much fun, but some people do enjoy the joust. I'm definitely one of those people. But this is something where it's just so, like how do you have a conversation with somebody who believes this new nonsense? Because they didn't do any research. They just know that Biden said this, and then, you know, some article from some left-wing website said Fox News said it, so therefore it's true. Which, you know, is just obnoxious. It's just it's the world we live in, and it's what we deal with.